From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Noel is not here today,
but will be returning in the future. They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul, Mission Control Deccan. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. So, we're traveling abroad today, Matt.
Yes.
Through the power of imagination, podcast, and the mind.
Really, it's the only traveling outside of the United States that I've gotten to do in a long time.
Oh, yeah. Now, you have been to other countries.
I have, but not in a very, very long time. So through the magic of research and podcasting, we're going to take a trip today.
Yes, a very strange trip, as we are wont to do on this show. Let's check in real quick with Mission Control. How we doing, man? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Pretty good thumb. That was a solid thumb.
Yeah, it was.
It was a solid thumb. We are taking a trip together, the three of us. That is a weird thing. Maybe we'll reveal more about that in the future, right? By the time this podcast comes out, we may have completed our trip.
I'm almost certain. Yeah, I'm almost certain we'll be arriving back here from New York.
Oh, wow. Time is getting weird. What is the present? Now,
I know.
It's the moment for those of us listening to this for the first time. Anyway, time, space, it's a whole bag of badgers and a messy colander of spaghetti. But today we're not dealing with time and space. We have been covering quite a few tech, science, or social-related topics and conspiracies in recent episodes, so this time, we're planning to explore something a little different, a bit grisly, magic, mania, murder. And I want to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations because, Matt, neither you nor I speak the languages that will occur in today's show.
Very, very true. The languages that are spoken as we travel to Malaysia.
Ku nyanyikan lagu ini.
Now, it is true that some of our fellow listeners actually live in Malaysia or have spent time there. We found that out when we did an earlier episode on the oily man.
Yes.
Remember that?
We had several people write in with specifics.
Mm-hmm. Specific anecdotes of similar events. Also some helpful, handy pronunciation guides.
Yeah.
So if you are listening, feel free to help us out. We always prefer a bit of illumination to the darkness that surrounds us in this chaotic universe. If you are familiar with Malaysian pop music, if you have a deep, deep knowledge of it, then you may notice the song that we played is Malaysian in origin. If you were a very ardent, knowledgeable fan of Malay music, you might have said, hey, that's Mona Fandey.
Also known as, or born as, Nur Maznah Binti Ismail. And she was born in Kangar, Perlis, or Perlis, Perlis.
As a child, she was engaged in regular extracurricular events, school dances. She was a water ballet performer, and she became a mildly successful singer under the stage name Mona Fandey with an album called Diana 1. It was released in 1987.
And it should be noted that that was a self-produced album, and it was also distributed by herself and her husband.
That's right. Her husband, who during courtship actually met her because he said he was her biggest fan, which is beautiful. And then he said, I want to help you attain the fame that you deserve. They had some limited success. Mona Fandey was for a long time best known for the song Ku Nyanyikan Lagu Ini. And that's what we played a snippet of earlier. And it feels very late 80s. It feels very in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
she continued working toward that dream of fame. She had a few TV appearances, but her career wasn't taking off. And this is something that happens to many, many people, right? Hollywood and the music industry, entertainment in general, is paved with broken dreams.
Yeah, she clearly had the drive and quite a bit of talent there, as you heard in that song. But there's so much luck that comes into a lot of the performance-based careers, just with who you end up meeting, who ends up hearing your thing or seeing your thing,
right?
Who talks about you at what party,
and no small amount of corruption.
Oh yeah.
When I see, this is very cynical and sad, but when I see people become big stars, quote unquote, out of nowhere, I just assume that they are the product of a music industry campaign. And that's not a ding on their talent. That's just how this broken system functions.
Exactly.
So it's through no fault of her own, really, that Mona Fandey does not become an international Malaysian superstar in the world of pop music. It just didn't work out. And she found a different calling. She and her husband switched careers. They pivoted their focus. They began studying traditional medicinal practice, healing through herbs, meditation, seasonal rituals, that sort of stuff. And she seemed set to gently, quietly fade from the public consciousness and live out the remainder of her life quietly with her husband. Oh, we should mention his name, Mona Fandey Abdul Rahman.
But all of this changed in 1993 when this relatively unknown, obscure former pop star was implicated in something much, much more serious. See, the whole time she'd been claiming to, practice traditional medicine with her husband, she was actually engaging in a more sinister and dangerous form of magic.
That's correct, Matt. Mona Fandey, you see, was a bomoh, a sorcerer, and she had just committed murder. We'll be back after a word from our sponsor. Here's where it gets crazy. For a time, Fandey and her husband had a fairly successful traditional, let's call it magical consulting business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this kind of profession, it really makes you have to search for clients. So, in any profession, you're looking for someone else to use your service or buy your goods or anything like that. But in this case, because it is a little more, I don't know what you'd call it, of a boutique kind of thing, or that's not the right word.
High end.
It could be high end, especially if you're paying for services of a bomoh, a sorcerer, to, give you either fame or fortune or power or something like that. That's generally the reason that people seek out these types of sorcerers. And they were always looking for clients, who were in the upper echelons of things.
Sure, VIPs.
And they found a few, at least according to the two of them, they found several high-end clients within the government and a few other places.
Who wish to remain anonymous. That was a big thing with their service too. People weren't openly identified as clients because, magic has always been a divisive thing in the modern day. Some people very much believe in traditional shamanistic practices. Other people eschew it entirely and prefer to live a more secular life. So especially in the world of politics, depending upon your constituency, it might be really cool that you engage in these practices, or it may make you seem less credible to some voters.
But either way, if you're using them for a darker purpose, you probably want to keep that hidden. Right.
And Fandey and co. found a big fish in the form of a state assemblyman from Batu Talam named Datuk Maslan Idris. Maslan was educated in the U.S., and he was thirsty. He was an ambitious politician from the ruling party, United Malays National Organization, or UMNO. He wanted the bomoh to provide services that would boost his political career. He wanted to be the chief minister and thought, if we keep this quiet through the use of magic, we can make my career more auspicious. We can tilt the scales a bit, the scales of luck and corruption that are so common in the entertainment industry and in the world of politics. Just a little finger on a scale. Just swing the needle a bit.
Just enough.
So Mona Fandey did not work alone. Her husband, of course, we had mentioned, Afandi, worked with her, and they had an assistant named Jarami Hassan. So there are 3 people involved.
And the assistant was a little bit younger than them.
Yes, very important. You'll hear some reports that he was 31. You'll hear some reports that he was in his late 20s.
And you'll also hear reports that he was maybe, I don't know the correct term, but a little learning disabled or something to that effect.
Right, that he had lower intelligence. Mm-hmm. That's a very important point, too, for this story. So Mona and her husband promised to help this politician, Maslan, by giving him a talisman consisting of a cane and spatmi headgear. The headgear, they said, was supposedly owned once upon a time by former Indonesian President Sukarno, who was tremendously important in the history of Indonesia. He was involved with the struggle for independence, and he was the actual first president of Indonesia as an independent country.
So a very powerful person.
Kind of a George Washington figure.
Yeah, and they're saying that these talismans were owned by this powerful person, and if we give them to you, it's also going to imbue you with some powers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So they convinced him. They said, not only will you be a more powerful and favored politician, you will be invincible.
Yes.
When you physically hold this object.
Invincible. And, to get that kind of power, if you truly believe it, could be incredible. And in return for this power, they demanded that Maslan pay them 2.5 million ringgit, or RM. That's just the currency there in Malaysia at the time. And that is equal to, at least in 2001 dollars, because that's the last time we saw it actually switched over, it was around $658,000.
So that might vary a little bit because this is back in the early 90s, but that's a good ballpark, right? So more than $500,000 US. He paid them 500,000 ringgit as a deposit, and then he wanted to give them a guarantee so that they knew he wouldn't just vanish. Well, they probably demanded it.
Yeah.
So he gave them 10 land titles to hold on to, and that would cover the remaining 2 million.
That's an incredible amount of money and land to give to something that may or may not be true. You have to believe that this politician believed so deeply in this that he was willing to give up all of that.
And here's what happened next. They made an appointment for these cleansing rituals to be performed at the Fandey household. Maslan visited the couple's house in Uludong, Rob, for what was called a mandi bunga ceremony, a ritual flower bath. Maslan was told to lie on the ground, face up. Mona placed flowers around him and on him ritualistically. She told Maslan to close his eyes and wait for the money to fall from the sky. He did close his eyes.
But flowers weren't the only thing that fell down upon him.
Let's stay in this moment for a second. What do you think he's expecting to happen?
He's given them riches. He's given them land. All he's asking for in return is this ritual and this talisman, and he will be invincible. He'll be ready to go. But that's not what happens. Instead, an axe falls down upon his neck, and he is killed.
He is decapitated. And decapitation is a gruesome, strange way to die. Studies show that the brain and the attached sensory organs are still functioning for some time. So decapitation is one of those few forms of death where you can be physically removed from the rest of your body and see your headless corpse on your way out.
Yeah.
But of course, you'll probably be in such shock and so panicked that you won't really calmly observe that. The assistant is the one, Drami Hassan is the one who is believed to have played the headsman and separated Maslan from his body.
At least that's according to reports we've read, and it came out in part of the trial that we'll learn about here in a moment.
They didn't stop there, though, did they, Matt?
No. They then proceeded to dismember Maslan fully. They cut him up into 18 different parts. They also skinned part of Maslan's body, and later on, they discovered those 18 parts buried in a storeroom underneath the ground near Mona's house in Penang. It was underneath this concrete slab, essentially.
Right.
And another big thing here is that they didn't find all of him. There were parts of him missing.
And no one knows what happened to those parts.
But the rumors, of course, you could imagine, are that those parts were consumed.
By the three people, or at the very least used in ritual. It's a bit strange for the neighborhood hippie to engage in such behavior. But you see, Mona Fandey, her husband, and their assistant were not your friendly neighborhood herbalist. They were a different kind of bomoh. We'll examine this after a word from our sponsor. We've returned. Bomoh, B-O-M-O-H. This term often gets mistranslated in the West. It's something that you and I have run into before, and people will say, oh, bomoh means, medicine man, or the more offensive witch doctor, right?
Yeah.
However, at its heart, the term bomoh describes a shaman. Indonesian speakers often describe this profession with the term dukun, D-U-K-U-N. Bomoh are mainly herbalists and healers. But the practice of magic is inseparable from these medicinal pursuits. Thus, a bomoh is also a geomancer, or at times a sorcerer. In Malaysian culture, most bomoh are what we would call bomoh putih, P-U-T-I-H, white bomoh. This is the equivalent of the right-hand path in Western magic systems, someone who helps other people while also obeying the dictates of shamanic tradition and, at the same time, straddling the tenets of Islam, because this is a heavily Muslim population.
But that is not the path that we'll continue to call her Mona Fandey, just for the ease of pronunciation on our end. That was not the path that she chose, as well as her husband and the assistant. She was instead a bomoh hitam, or hitam, or black bomoh. Now that's a different path here. The other path, the forbidden path, right? Who are going to be working with things like spirits that are not necessarily supposed to be interacted with. They will look at the laws that are put forth in whatever religion is current or popular, wherever this magic is being done, in this case Islam, and they will see those laws as something that are not meant to be followed or are meant to be flouted.
Right. The idea being that working around these laws, these moral and magical and social laws, will allow you influence and power that would ordinarily be out of your reach. Bomoh hitam, and that's H-I-T-A-M, are supposed to be the sorts of monsters you would see in horror movies. You know what I mean? Not in real life. To call someone bomoh hitam would be very, very offensive, because it's essentially the same thing as calling a doctor or a life-saving surgeon a butcher or a serial killer. It's the opposite of what bomoh are supposed to be doing. However, that's what the Mona Fandey group appeared to be, at least in the media. When this story hit, it hit big. So they did this, ritualistically killed, dismembered, probably used to some degree the body of Maslan and other rituals, and they might have gotten away with it. Maslan was not reported missing until July 2nd, 1993, after withdrawing 300,000 ringgit from a bank. And directly after the murder, Mona Fandey was reported to have gone on a shopping spree. She didn't just buy, colorful clothing or jewelry or something. She went big. She bought a Mercedes-Benz. She bought a facelift. I didn't know you could just do that. You could just buy a facelift.
Yeah, it's very strange. And one of the most odd things here is the timeline, because it is reported that he went missing on July 2nd, and it was immediately after he withdrew a large amount of money. He did not withdraw 500,000 ringgit, right? Like it was originally reported early on, or at least that was the deal, I guess. So he at least could withdraw 300,000, assuming it was him that withdrew it on that day before he went missing, and then paid them. So he paid them money.
Sure, yeah. Just not all of it. Not long after Maslan's murder, the assistant, Jerami Hassan, was picked up for a drug offense. He was under the influence of these drugs, and this is a country with harsh drug laws. While he was under the influence of these drugs and speaking with the police, he confessed to them that he had been involved in the murder of a politician, an up-and-coming politician.
Now that's one of those things where you're dealing with somebody who may not be, of the highest intelligence, who is also perhaps high on a substance, who is being pressed, by interrogators. Then he admits to, these police officers that he had something to do with it. And it may not have held much sand if he had led them. Like, he is the person that actually led the police to where the body was buried.
Under that concrete slab. Not long after, the couple was arrested, Fandey and her husband, because Hassan, it was on her property, and then also Hassan openly said that they did this. They committed this murder together. And then the circus began. It was, in a way, it was reminiscent of how American culture treats the infamous murderers and the depraved, right? They get a lot of attention. They're celebrities for a time. Mona Fandey, as a murder suspect, gained far more fame and celebrity and public recognition than she ever did as a pop singer. And if all she wanted to do was to be famous, this strikes me as one of those infernal deals you hear about in folklore.
Yeah.
Right? Where the wording is very important. Make a sacrifice to me, says some powerful entity or spirit, and I shall give you that which you desire. And then they said, we will make these sacrifices. We'll obey the rules of this ritual. Make me famous.
Yeah. Make me famous. They carry it out, and they sure as heck do get famous.
It's strange. It's interesting when you think about it, right? Now, we don't have any primary source for that kind of conversation, just like we don't have any source for what happened to the rest of Maslan's body parts, nor do we have a source for what Mona and her husband and their assistant talked about or personally believed.
And we also don't know exactly the circumstances, at least Maslan's side, of giving them all of this money for these things, as well as giving them the land titles. Because we'll talk about it towards the end there, but it may have been something else going on entirely that didn't even occur in the trial, and it would just be me speculating. But I think I have a hypothesis.
I would love to hear this. I'm very curious. Let's explore the trial. So, in a very dark way, Mona Fandey finally gets her wish, and she seems to be enjoying this new social position, somewhere between fascinating and shunned and vilified, rightly so. Throughout the trial, Mona Fandey exhibits strange, incongruous behaviors. She is always cheerful. She's constantly smiling, mugging for the camera, posing for the press. She's dressing extravagantly with bright, colorful designs, and she's got a new banging outfit every day. Why then did they murder this politician? We have one guess from another bomoh, a self-styled king of the bomoh, Ibrahim Matzin, and he said that Fandey and her associates used their shamanistic knowledge for evil, because Fandy was consumed by the idea of getting vengeance, because Fandy was consumed by the idea of revenge, that the politician Maslan had made and broken multiple promises, and she said, we will have vengeance. We should also point out that Ibrahim Matzin is not the most ironclad source. He gained the most notoriety in his home country and in the Western news for a series of rituals he conducted in an effort to help locate the missing Malaysian Airlines plane MH370, which we had talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
He was not successful with this, but later he recanted on what he was saying because he apologized. He said, I'm no longer king of the bomoh. These rituals I was just doing what they told me to do. Wow. And he said that some of the things he had done, like using bamboo binoculars and a fish trap hook to help locate the aircraft, he said, I was peering through these, but I didn't really see anything.
Jeez.
So he may not be the best source, but he was also a bomoh, and he being one of the most famous, he remarked on this trial. So here's what they found. And it's very strange. The dates are confusing. The court found that the murder occurred sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight on July 18th, 1993. That's weird.
Yeah. Because he was reported missing on the 2nd of that month.
So what happened?
16 days later, they think that's when he was killed. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up. This is where my hypothesis comes in. I think if he truly was missing from at least the 2nd, we can maybe assume even the 1st or the last of the previous month, because it generally takes that long to declare someone missing. And he took money out on the 2nd. Mm-hmm. I think he must have been held captive there because in my mind, you don't have someone go missing the day that they pay you 300 ringgit, then hang around your house for several days, let's say 16 days in this case, then do a ritual
with maybe
them.
It was a multi-day ritual?
Maybe 16 days, though. And if it's a multi-day ritual, and then the way it's described in every report that I've seen of this, it's that it was a very fast thing. He was having the flower petal ritual occurred, and then he got his head chopped off. To me, this seems like they were holding him captive.
I see. They were tried in court by a 7-person jury. This was before trial by jury was abolished in the country. And the High Court found all 3 of them guilty, sentenced them to death by hanging. And the legal representatives for Hassan, the assistant, argued that he couldn't essentially be tried as an adult due to his limited mental capacity. And that our source for these ideas about his cognitive difficulties do all come from that lawyer. So the trial goes on until 1995, at which point the High Court finds all 3 defendants guilty and sentences them to death. The method of death is hanging by the neck until dead.
Yeah, and it feels old school. Like, sure. It's a British knot tied to basically a pole that's running above a floor that drops down.
And Mona Fandey, as well as her husband and their assistant, seemed to take the news in stride. This was bizarre. She did not stop smiling. She had a brave public face.
She thanked the court and the Malaysian people immediately after the guilty verdict.
Yep, that is true. And we know that they did exercise some emotion in the intervening time because they filed appeals. There was an appeal system here. So the sentence was not actually carried out for a number of years.
Oh, yeah, for quite a while. They continued through all of the possible appeals processes.
Which, of course, you would do if your life was literally on the line.
Yeah.
In 1999, the court dismissed all their appeals, upheld the previous death sentence, and so it came to pass that November 2001, all 3 were hanged. A prison official said the the three people expressed zero remorse at the execution that took place in the early hours of the day.
Yeah, and it says, you'll see reports that say they met up with their families. They were allowed 8 hours or so to meet up with their families prior to being killed. You'll also find it reported that they ate KFC as a last meal, and then simultaneously you'll see it reported that they chose not to eat a last meal.
Right. And part of the divergent reporting here comes about from muckraking journalism, or sensationalism, I guess I would say.
Well, and there's also the problem of translation and it occurring so long ago, right before the internet was so available, with so many sources.
This leads us to one thing that has been reported in multiple sources and is chilling. So Mona Fandey seems calm. Perhaps she has resigned herself to this grisly end, or perhaps she knows something, or thinks she knows something, that other people do not. During her execution, while she was calm and smiling under her hood, she uttered her final words, Aku takkan mati. In English, that means, I will never die. Spooky stuff.
Certainly. And in a way, she's right. We played you that music of her voice. It's still around. She didn't fully die. Her corporeal body is gone, but she lives on.
Let's play another clip from that song and see if your experience of this music changes, knowing what you know now.
Well, there's one thing for certain. As we mentioned before, parts of this politician Maslan's body were never found. We will never know exactly what was done with those, because the only people who do know are now in their graves.
True. This case also led for national calls to outlaw witchcraft. That's a difficult thing to enforce. How do we define witchcraft, right? How do we separate that from traditional religious beliefs?
It was, that's a strange thing. It's always going to be a strange thing, I think.
Very blurry line.
Yeah.
Right?
We also know that this was one of the last jury trials in Malaysia because they stopped using trials by jury.
Yep. It also led to a controversial film loosely based on these events. Film called Dukan, which, as you'll recall, is the earlier cited Indonesian word describing a bomoh. The film was completed, I think, around 2006, and it was banned from release for 11 years because of the controversy surrounding it.
And then Facebook leaked it. Somebody on Facebook leaked the entire movie.
In 2018? That's how it got out?
Yeah.
And then after it got out, after the demons were out of Pandora's jar, the film went on to be quite successful.
Yeah. They decided, well, I guess we can release this. And, it is based. You said loosely based, like so loosely based, but it is about a bomoh hitam of sorts doing some pretty intense things, including, a murder. But this time it's, spoiler alert, with a sword.
Right. Dukan is probably best described as a legal thriller / horror, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Very dum 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 dum.
The trailer looks cool.
The trailer does look cool. So at this point, we run into a couple of questions, and these are questions that we would like to give to you. We want to hear your take on this. First, what do you think about the practice? This goes back to our idea of the serial killer merchandise people. What do you think about the practice of making films based on these events and profiting from them? Is it ethical? Is it a big deal, not a big deal? And what do you think about this strange, sordid, grisly tale? Was there actual magic involved? Or was this all just window dressing? So much ornamentation for a human, all too real, all too mundane con job and murder.
Yeah, and also why do you think, even after they got paid, that they decided to kill this person? That is perplexing to me. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that if what they are saying is true and their story checks out, they could have bilked him for so much more money if he was willing to pay that much to them.
And what if it was a case of accident? What if Hassan was meant to, like, ritualistically descend the axe and then in some way avoid harming the guy so that he believes he's invulnerable? I mean, that's what you would do in a con job, right?
Ooh, or yeah, dude, you're so right.
And maybe he just actually did it.
Or what if they all really believed it?
Or what if they all really believed it?
Whoa.
So what do you think? One of the fascinating things about this sort of story is that there are multiple stories, or in recent years, concerning this sort of interaction between magic and true crime. You know, we've heard of, I don't know if we ever did a full episode on this. We've heard of the practice in some countries of abducting and dismembering people suffering from albinism, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to hear your stories. Is there anything like this that's occurred in your country or your part of the world? The U.S. is not immune to this, by the way. True Detective Season 1, the HBO series, is based on a very real satanic conspiracy that occurred in a church in the South. It's a true story, and Nick Pizzolatto did base a lot of True Detective on it, no matter what he said at the beginning.
Yeah. And you know, except for that whole part with the, I don't know, multi-dimensional monster guy, like whatever he was. Who knows about that?
The King in Yellow?
Yeah. That dude, I still want him to explain to me the shot in the last episode of season 1. Maybe I'll just talk to him about it. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who may have not seen the entire thing.
Spoiler warning. After this moment, there are spoilers. 3, 2, 1.
So the shot where they're trying to follow him down this maze, do you remember at the very end, the climax, essentially? Mm-hmm. They're following the Yellow King through his essentially portal into this other world that he's created, and his underworld. To the old what seemed ostensibly to be a pirate fort or something. Yeah, it was crazy. And then I believe one or both of the detectives look up at the ceiling. I'm looking at Paul to see if he remembers this, and it becomes a shot of basically the universe or the galaxies or something.
An unfamiliar night sky.
Yeah, but they're inside, a location somewhere, and they're looking up and seeing this, and it gives you this feeling of maybe this is a multi-dimensional situation. Maybe they went through some kind of portal to get somewhere else. I don't understand what's happening, and then they fight with this guy who seems to have superhuman powers, and then it's over.
This is interesting. This may be a bit of a tangent, but it is established during the show that Rust Cole, the one who glimpses this other universe, suffers from, or leverages at least, hallucinations, visions, right?
Yeah.
So he's already prone to doing that kind of thing. I read a very interesting theory that I do not completely agree with, which is that the King in Yellow is some sort of non-corporeal entity, and that by killing the scarred man, the spaghetti face guy, Russ Cole, when he sees this multidimensional thing just before, he essentially becomes possessed by this entity. And that's why at the very end, when Woody Harrelson's character is talking to him and wants to tell him more about, what's going to happen and new leads they can follow, that's why Cole immediately dismisses it and is calm and serene as they get wheeled out. I don't think that's true. I think it is really cool, and I love a dose of cosmic horror.
Me too. I was so excited when it happened, and I thought we were going to get a little more something, or at least a extra piece of it, like
About this
confirming,
cult.
confirming at least that it was mystical in some way. But then it was just like, all's good. See you later. Let's get out of this hospital.
Right. And I have sort of my own origin story about the cult that I would love to talk with you guys with, maybe over a beer or something. We can have an episode of Beers Where It Gets Crazy.
Yeah, Beers Where It Gets Crazy. And can we write a prequel?
Why not?
Where it's you and me and Paul and Noel and everybody else listening. We're all just trying to find out who the Orange Duke is.
Let's give it a shot. And we can just send it to Nick Pizzolatto as a fan piece.
Let's do it.
All right, so let us know if you have some ideas for our True Detective prequel or if you have a role you would like to play. As always, we're on the lookout for bad guys. And let us know, of course, what you think about the intersection between magic and true crime. You can tell us about this on Instagram. You can tell us about this on Facebook. Shout out to our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, our excellent moderators, our top-notch memes, and a place where you can hang out with your fellow listeners. You can also call us directly if you would prefer to stay off the digital grid.
Yes, our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. And everyone, I'm here to report that there are officially 300 plus unheard messages right now because there are so many coming through.
Just send me the...
Do you hear me? 300 plus. And they're ranging between a minute and 3 minutes right now. That is a lot of tape. But we're going to get through it. Keep sending them to us. We're just going to keep trucking. It's a lot.
I was thinking about this off air. We should make a thing of it. We should make a day. Let's go grab some popcorn or some snacks or something, and then we'll just play through them. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Or we should just we should make an episode. Seriously, an episode where it's just us in a room playing the messages and reacting in real time to them. Never hearing them before.
Do you think people would listen to that?
I think so, because there's that element of, I don't know what's coming next. And we won't know either.
I might be on the show, say some of our listeners, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's give it a shot. I'm sold. In the meantime, speaking of episode ideas, you can always let us know what you think your fellow listeners will enjoy. You are the most important part of this show. We want to be easy to reach. We want to be easy to talk to. And if you hate social media, you, like me, are terrified of the idea of having to be on the phone or touch one, you can email us directly. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.